A statement made years ago by a long-standing politician from Boston is relevant to this exercise. And what he said, Tip O'Neill, is all politics is local. And for me, all research is local. It starts with an individual faculty, maybe a collaborative project, but it starts by someone in a department, joint between institutions, but it has a local component. And part of my intent here is not only to stimulate more local research, but also to capture the expertise of people who are here, who've got valuable insights that can help that stimulation of further research productivity. And so we started with Linda Helena, who talked about Fulbright, and we moved on to talk about articles. We have two wonderful colleagues who are both leaders in journals. It's a great conversation. And so we're moving today to tap some of our local expertise on books. And I'm delighted then that Bob, Dana, and Femi are able to share some of their expertise on books. What I also know, and it's not unique to York, faculty colleagues are generally reluctant to talk about themselves. And so what I've been asking as a standard procedure is to have the people who are going to be speaking about their expertise to leave something that they can take away. That invariably people are embarrassed to talk about here, but I really want colleagues to know beyond the group here, we've got a lot of expertise on various aspects of research. And we're going to hear vignettes about books today from people who've written, who've been there, who've got the expertise. And the idea is, once colleagues who come and participate in the conversation are interested, if they're interested in doing a book, a year from now, this year, I really want to see if there's a way for us to tap into the expertise. So if you're thinking of writing a book, maybe you want to talk to Bob after today, or you want to talk to Dana after today, you want to talk to Femi after today, to figure out things that you weren't able to discover or learn here. Are there issues you might want to benefit from that expertise? So that's the concept. Local expertise, how can we benefit from the local expertise to move on? And what we normally do is we do some self-introductions except for the speakers. And I come back to the speakers after each of us would have introduced ourselves. And I would give you, after the self-introduction by the speaker, the bio to take with you, so that we can have here in your local environments the expertise we have. So why don't we start with Jim?
Shinbai from Teacher Education. I'm interested in knowing, is it a natural process to consider publishing books when you're engaged in publishing journals? Like me, like junior faculty, like what's the process?
Great.
I want to learn from
Great.
senior faculty.
Great. We'll hear from our student.
My name is Shanae, and I'm a journalism major.
And my mouth is full and embarrassed because the provost got me the right time.
I thought you was going to go. Yeah, I'm a journalism major. I'm supposed to be graduating this semester, and I'm student interning at the marketing and communications department.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We can come back to you. Let's go to Marcia. Then we can come back to you.
I'm Marcia Montgomery, most of you know me, and I work in marketing and communications, and I cover a lot of the events that the provost and others host on campus.
Great, thanks, Marcia.
Martina Tangana, history. I'm the chair of the Department of History and Philosophy, and author of a few books. That's why I'm very interested in this panel. I would like to hear experience from others. See how it goes. Maybe there's something I did wrong. Maybe what I did was good, and it might be helpful for the next time I'm considering publishing another book. Thank you.
Holger? No, we'll come back to that.
Holger Henke, Assistant Provost. It's exciting to be here, see that book publications at York are being taken to the next level.
Great.
Cindy Howard from English, and I've got a concept, so I'm very interested to hear how you begin to develop that into a proposal, and also how it's different writing a book than writing a journal article. What kinds of new habits do you have to form in order to complete a book?
Great.
Linda Grasso, the chair of English. I have published a book and I'm writing a second one. So, like being around people who have written books.
So we'll skip Dana and Femi, we'll go to Don. We're doing self-introductions.
Hi, I'm Dawn Hewitt. I'm the Director of Research and Sponsored Programs here at York College.
Great. So let's go back to Bob. Say a little bit about yourself, Bob, and not just name, rank, and serial number. And then we'll go to Dana.
Do you want to get that, Beshi?
I'm Bob Parmet, history. I've been here a few years, and in that time, actually, I've been able to turn out some books. And I really am eager to discuss some of my experiences, some of the things that I've picked up along the way. Not all very pleasant. I hope I don't discourage people. I really do want to encourage scholarship. I think it's extremely important for us, for everybody, and especially our students to whom we bring the results of that scholarship. So this is a critical thing for, I think, college, and I want to be part of it.
Great. Great. Dana?
I'm a professor in the Department of Teacher Education. I've been at York for 13 years. This was my first book. Might be my last book. No, probably. I am actually working on 2 other books right now.
Right. Good. Femi?
My name is Femi Sumanu. I'm from the Math and Computer Science Department. I have just this one book, and
for now,
that weighs 50 pounds.
That's like a real book.
That should count as 2, I think.
Yeah, it's a textbook. So you know, I've been invited by the provost to share my experience through this and what I'm thinking now. I have a sister book to this one that I hope will come out shortly after I return from sabbatical, if I get the sabbatical. And I was just approached by another publisher to write a book for one of our lower level math courses.
Great.
So I'm trying to see if I can learn from what I have done in this case, to see what would be the best way to put together, maybe, you know, collaborate with somebody else, because I don't. After doing this by myself, I don't want to do that again.
Once is enough, huh?
It's you know, it's just a lot of stuff. I would prefer to work with somebody else, so that I can bounce ideas back, because each time I read the book, I find one little something that wasn't supposed to be the, you know, and I just get frustrated with that, because I thought I read this thing. My students read it for a number of semesters, and I still come back and I find that, yeah, some comma was, and in math, that matters. It could change. It could change what we're talking about. So I don't like that. I feel if I bounce it back between another, you know, that would reduce that. We don't have much. I note them down at the back of the book each time.
Don't tell us now. Don't tell us now. Tell us
you know, but that's what I am trying to avoid in the next book. The next book. Thank you.
For a small fee, I'll help you.
So here's what I'd recommend. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ben.
I was hiding. Uncommonly, I was hiding. Beth Rosenthal, social sciences. I'm just staying for a few minutes. I'm busy teaching my independent research.
Sure. Good. We're doing self-introductions.
Hello.
The grand entrance.
I'm Heather Robinson. I'm from English.
Good.
With an English accent.
Australian, but I'm sounding very commie these days.
Who also has a book concept?
Good. So what I'm going to do now is just circulate and take one for yourself and take one for your colleague, a colleague in your department, the bios of our colleagues. Before Heather came in, I was saying very often we've got the expertise and we don't know about it, invariably because faculty colleagues don't like to talk about themselves. And sometimes your expertise is more recognized and rewarded and honored outside by another institution than in your own. So I want people to know about the people who are experts, who've written books, who are editors of journals, and I am not going to be reluctant to share that expertise. What I recommend we do is turn to Bob first and Dane and then Femi. Take 10, 12 minutes and share with us anything you like as a way of starting the conversation. But I want to pick up on a couple of things that were said before Bob starts, and to start with something that Bob said. Not all that he might say is pleasant. I'm not interested in only the pleasant stuff. Whatever is your experiences you think are helpful to share, because writing articles, writing books are not necessarily all pleasant. So we want to hear the pleasant and we want to hear the not so pleasant. And the things that may be not so pleasant can be lessons for people going forward. So don't feel compelled only to say the good stuff.
Thank you.
But let me say something else, and I think it was Halka who remarked on this. Once I got here, I not only realized that we had faculty who had written and edited books, but I realized that the library was not the only place for that to be showcased. So I have a place in our office where we put faculty books on display. When you have a book, send it to us so we can put it to display. And you'd be amazed how many people come to that office and have an appreciation that they didn't have about who on campus is writing, is editing books by full-time faculty. We have a book here by part-time faculty, an adjunct, in English. So it's not only having it displayed in the library. But I also think it's important to celebrate when books are produced with a book party. We did one 2 years ago, December 13, and I'm hoping that there is enough, even if it is 4 or 5 this year, we'll do another book party. And you might recall Femi's book was launched, Dana was not there, Bob's last book. I have just 2 requirements for the book party. 1, bring students. Students need to see that the professors write it. 2nd, make it an intellectual party. Just don't come out wine and cheese. Talk about the book. Talk about what's been the analysis, what's been the output, what are the challenges. So when we hold the next book party, we want to keep those caveats. Bring students who can see themselves and have an appreciation of their faculty, but also have an intellectual conversation, not just a social conversation. So we'll turn to Bob, then we'll go to Dana, and then we'll go to Femi. Anything you want to put on the table, 10, 12 minutes. We'll move to the next person, then we'll open it up for a conversation.
Thank you. Okay. The first thing I'd like to say is that one of our greatest dangers as...
You have to speak a little louder because it's being recorded.
Okay, one of our greatest dangers as academics is the feeling that once we receive our graduate degrees, our writing skills may be put in mothballs, that we've done our theses, and that's it. And that's it. We found employment, and we don't have to go beyond that. That's a big mistake. It certainly affects our skills, and then does affect the way we teach, because we have that much less to bring to our students. The great advantage of somebody who does research, does writing, is the ability to share the results of the research with students. That said, in approaching a book, there are any number of questions which should seem rather obvious, I guess, to most, if not all of us. So please bear with me if you hear these things that you've mulled over 1,000,000 times yourself. First thing is, what kind of book do you want to write? And why? Okay, do you want to write a monograph? Do you want to do a research study? Do you want to edit some primary or secondary documents? Do you want this to be a popular book, maybe a picture book, or even a juvenile book? There are any number of books. And the question is, what am I doing? Why am I spending this time? Why am I going to devote X number of years on this project? Do I really want to do it? Do I want to do it, or do I need to do it? Must I do it for academic gain, or am I looking to make money? That's another thing. What's the reason? And the reason is that it better be pretty good, because if it's not good, you're going to be bored. You're going to be bored, and then you're going to resent all the time, the expense, and everything else that goes with it. Let's face reality there. It becomes the elephant on one's back. We don't need that. Nobody needs that. And once we have that, then the next question is, again, and it's related to the first, what kind of audience do we expect? Do we expect to write a bestseller? Well, most of us, I'm afraid, will not be doing that. Okay, or what? And let's be realistic about it. If we're writing a scholarly book, the chances are that it's not going to be a bestseller, and we'll be happy to sell X number or a limited number of copies and have minimal royalties. So let's face that too. And so we come down to that, and this is what we have to then present to a prospective publisher. And here we go into a jungle. Let's understand that, and I've seen this so many times, that basically the publishers look at academics as people who have to perish, who are going to perish if they're not published. And so they have the advantage, they have the leverage, all right? And what does that really mean? They don't have to promise the world. And for most academics, if they simply said, we'll publish, the prospective author will go out and get drunk. That's enough. Forget about money, forget about fame, glory.
I didn't even get that.
Yeah, that's it. And, so, and they know that. That's it. They know that. That's a big advantage, and it's not good. And I dare say, too, though we're not perhaps looking to make money, heaven forbid we wouldn't make money, publishers are running businesses, and increasingly to even academic or university houses are following the bottom line. The University of Missouri Press just recently pulled out of publishing, and then they, well, I guess it was protest, and they came back. All right, but this is the thing. So they are interested in the money. They are interested in the audience and the number of copies they're going to sell, especially if they are textbook houses. And so they want to know who's going to buy it, how many copies do you expect to sell, where you're going to sell it. So you have to be careful there. And how big is the book going to be? I've had a situation where one university press, and this was Columbia, telling me that they wouldn't accept a manuscript of more than 450 pages. And that's absurd. Absolutely absurd, because you just, of course, you chop that when you get the published version, which might be 250. All right, so you have to somehow know your publisher. Know your publisher, and that too is interesting, because how do you know your publisher? Well, we all have publishers' representatives who come by, and I like to tap them here and there. What are you looking for? Or how come there are no books in certain areas that I'm interested in? I'm always fishing around for that. All right. And what is their reputation? How are they to authors? How much editorial support do they provide? And the answer these days is not very much. They've been cutting back increasingly on their support. And editorial work today, copy editing, is minimal, absolutely minimal. And many of the academic presses now are entering into consortia, like this book of mine, Town and Gown. Okay, it's published by University Press, Fairleigh Dickinson, but it's really marketed by Rowman and Littlefield. And it's part of a group that includes several other schools. So here you have a commercial publisher that's basically handling the advertising and the production and the nuts and bolts for the university house. And that's a strained relationship too. And as I understand that they're increasingly, that this particular place, Rowman and Littlefield, has been pushing Fairleigh and others to do more and more of the work themselves, because they want to do less and less of the work. And even when they do the work, they farm it out. They outsource it. They outsource the indexing. They outsource this. They outsource that. And, of course, also they outsource the financing. Who pays for the indexing? Who pays for the illustrations? Who pays for this, that? Increasingly, it's the author. All right? And what choice does the author have, especially if the author is a lowly academic in the eyes of the publisher? So there's no choice. But this is the way it goes. This is the reality that we face. And that's why, again, you say you had better really want to write the book. You better feel strongly about it. Seriously, otherwise, you're going to say, well, why do I need this? Yeah, sure. And why do I need the time? It's like here, before this, the book on Later Leader, David Dubinsky, altogether took more than 20 years to appear. And why? did it take that much time? Well, at least 5 of those years were spent in the editorial work at NYU Press, where the editor who signed me up left the house, and then my project was put at the end of another editor's list. And so it took another 5 months or so until she got around to me. And she was an excellent editor. She's still there. Very, very fine work. She does excellent work and did good work for me. But it's all very time consuming, and it took forever. When you have to cut 100,000 words, that takes time. Okay, and again, it's the bottom line. Why cut all those words? Because they have a package, they have their market, and you understand another reality too, that the size of the finished product very often bears no relation to the price. The price depends on the market. All right, you see this with popular books today. Like I'm just thinking the book Winter of Europe. Ken Follett, one of my favorite authors, writes historical fiction. It's a big book. Maybe it's 900 pages, I think $35, which is half the price of my book, which is under 200 pages. Okay, so it's not a matter. It's not a matter of the size. It's the audience. It's the market. That's what they're looking at. They are the business people. Then they see us as the children. Okay, we are naive. We're not supposed to think in terms of money, but they do. All right. So you had really, as we say, better want to do this and do it badly. Then too, you really do have to negotiate if you can. Again, you're in a weak position. What about royalties, if you have any? If you have any leverage, probably not very much. What about reprints? What about copyright? New editions? There are any number of considerations that fall into it. But I wish we had the leverage. In any event, it comes back to why we are writing books. For most of us, it's a creative experience. We're writing. We're expressing ourselves, no matter what kind of book we're writing. And we have to have something to say. That's the other thing. Have something to say. Have something to really, energize that fuel in your tank. If you don't have anything to say, forget it again. Because it's a drag, it's a bore.
Or get another tank with fuel in it.
Yeah. Or write a book on having nothing to say.
That's a good one.
And you say,
Only one page.
But a really good cover.
And so you may want to produce a text that has a different slant from its predecessors, or you may want to use new insights. It's like I say with Abraham Lincoln. We need biographies of Lincoln. Who needs another biography of Abraham Lincoln? Okay? And it goes, the historians do this all the time. The biographies, new one of Thomas Jefferson, again and again and again, biographies on the same subject, or studies of the same subject. And you look, or just go on Amazon, or go into on the computer, and you see how many on a particular topic. Wow. So you have to have something to say. You have to justify it to yourself, to your publisher, of course, and to your audience. Make it worth their while to read your book. Make it worth your while to write your book. I think that's basically it.
Good.
Can I just add something to that? In terms of academic publishing and finding a publisher, one of the things that I think is really important is going to conferences, because they're looking for work.
You're right.
And so they might contact you if they like the sound of your paper or something. So conferences are really helpful in that way.
May just add, when you go to conferences also, you're making contacts with people.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's extremely important. Yeah.
We'll come back to some of those issues. I want to transition to Dana. But before we transition to Dana, I'd ask each of our colleagues to bring a copy of their book or books. And after the presentations, I really want to pass them around, if you haven't seen them as yet, just to get a flavor, to know that you can write one of these and more than these, and there's a certain realness if you see the product. So let's turn to Dana. Thanks, Bob.
So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the idea and the concept, and then how to go from the concept to the proposal stage, and then how to kind of keep it on track, and then how to celebrate it.
That's wonderful. That's what I came here for. Ready to write.
The concept for me was there, but the idea for turning a concept into a book was not. I was having a conversation with the provost, and I think I was just kind of sharing what was happening with the field of youth work. And he said, why don't you write a book? And I went, that's funny. And he said, seriously, you should write a book. And at the time I was serving as acting dean, and I thought, it's really funny. And he said, well, do an edited book. And I said, oh, I have tons of contacts and colleagues, you know, throughout the country and the world. I could actually do an edit. Like, that's something I can manage. So I think for me, the kickoff point wasn't just the idea, it was that the idea was manageable, and I knew I could bring it to fruition. And it turned out that doing an edited volume for me had also an added value, both in terms of the content of the book. There's more content in there than I could have told alone. I have 23 authors from all over the world, and it brought a certain international perspective that at that time I didn't have. So it also had an added value in terms of that collaborative process, and it was just good fun to work with people. So that's kind of the idea, and the, you know, I think what Bob was saying about the motivation, you know, that you have to have the really good motivation. For me, I think that was that I knew I could go from that idea to a final product. I could see the end product. Going then from that to figuring out how do you put together a prospectus and send that to a publisher and bring, you know, actually get a contract was a little more intimidating, given that I had never done that before. And I'll tell you a secret that's being filmed, that that I engaged in a little faux pas because I sent the prospectus to 5 publishers, not knowing you could only send it to one publisher at a time. Well, I got 3 rejection letters rather quickly, and then I didn't hear from the other 2, and I thought, oh, they probably just aren't even reading the thing or looking at it. It ended up, I learned later, that the 2 of them were in negotiation with each other for the book. And they decided amongst themselves who was going to take it. So it rather worked out, although I am told this is not what you're supposed to do. I think that for me, knowing your voice, and Bob said this already, I'm just kind of reiterating it, I think is really critical. Because the prospectus, you have to be really, really clear about your voice. What is the story that you want to tell? Who's the audience for that story? And I think that's a really important part of nailing it. And getting that right from the beginning helps frame the book, and I think helps you get that contract. So for me, that was a really critical point of it. Then once the prospectus was out there and I actually did get the contract, it was kind of easy in a way, because that was kind of the harder part of it, really. Once I had authors and people were writing and I was writing, we were writing. I mean, you know, that part of it as academics, we know how to do that. We write journal articles. To answer Cindy's question about what's different about writing a book and writing a journal article, I think some of it is I found at least, writing a book, I could bring more of myself into it in a certain way. I felt it was more authentic to my voice. I think when you're going for a journal article, there's a certain way that you're, at least in my field, you're writing more objectively, and there's a sense that yourself is kind of removed from that writing a bit. I think in the book, I made some statements that I wasn't afraid to make in the book that I may not have made in a journal article. So I think for me that it was a little bit of a shift, and that's probably very discipline specific. That may not be a kind of universal rule. And then I think staying on track for me was writing for at least 15 minutes every day. And I had a notebook, and sometimes it would just be a matter of writing to-dos, you know, like email such and such author to, you know, find out where they are with their writing. Sometimes it was, you know, new concepts or, you know, oh, I need to buy that book. Sometimes it was, you know, literally just writing a couple of sentences or a couple of paragraphs. But for me, if I wasn't doing that every single day, if too much time got in the way in between writing, it felt like I had to get my rhythm all over again. And I don't know if other people experience that, but if I could stay with it even a little bit every single day, the rhythm was there. I didn't have to find that rhythm again, and that was really important for getting it done. The other thing was then finding extended blocks of time to write my own chapters. So I originally wrote 3 chapters. I pulled one at the end because I had too much content, and I didn't want to pull somebody else's chapter because it was an edited book. So I pulled one of my own, and I think writing my own chapters meant I needed a couple of weeks to just, you know, lock myself away and hunker down and just kind of write. And then staying organized, because when you're doing an edited volume, you get multiple versions. I mean, I had 23 authors, so in addition to my own versions, just keeping track of, you know, the various versions, and so being very organized and having systems for that was helpful. And then when it's done, you know, you have to just kind of breathe and take a moment to celebrate it. And the book parties is a great idea that, you know, the college is supporting that. And I'm sorry I was away on sabbatical when, you know, the last one happened. But I think celebrating it is really important. And then I did some of my own marketing. I didn't rely on the publisher completely. I did some of my own marketing. So I set up a Facebook page, and it's the name of the book, and I put stuff on there every couple of days. You know, I'm up there, and I have a, you know, it's a growing kind of international audience of folks who like the page, may or may not have bought the book, may not even realize it really is a book, but it's just a Facebook page at this point. But I did do some of my own marketing for it. And I just want to thank you, because I really probably never would have written a book if it wasn't for that just little conversation. It was just a 5-minute conversation, but it just sparked that idea and made it a reality for me. You know, so I just wanted to thank you for that.
So maybe why don't we keep the questions for the end, because there may be a bunch of overlaps and so Femi?
You know, my own, it started from having to answer questions and questions and questions, because I teach that course, elementary differential equation, and I have been putting my notes together for quite a while, just writing something. I didn't intend it to be a book, but I had books that were, I wasn't satisfied with how they presented this material or how they presented that material. You know, math is pretty much the same, you know, at least at the level we're looking at. Things haven't changed that much, but it's just how you present the material, you know, especially with the age of technology and how things are changing. We have to revisit to see, you know, is there a better way to explain this particular concept? So, for the most part, I wasn't satisfied with some of the explanations of of the concepts in many of the books that I use. So I started to put together my own frame of mind, how I would explain it to my students, and when they will come into the Math Learning Center, then it's my problem to make sure that they understand it. Because if they come in there, they're there because they have questions. And I have to try to do a better job at explaining that concept. And so that pushed me to a level of, okay, it means these students don't, even though we taught them in pre-calculus how to do this, or calculus how to do that, they don't remember by the time they get to this level. I need to find a way to jog their memory about what they're supposed to know about this concept as I'm teaching that concept. and I don't want to go back and reteach whatever was taught in the previous class. So it's very challenging. So I started thinking about how do I do it? And that was what started me off, trying to put something together. And I had so many colleagues down here. The provost came to our department one day. We had a meeting, and we were talking, and when you remember the 3 R's and the 3 O's and the 3 A's, you know, it was one of those threes that. So the
And then
provost.
we have 3 B's.
So the provost came to discuss one of those 3 something. So and he said, you know, if just do something. Just do something. Write another chapter this semester. I thought, you know, I didn't tell him I'm writing anything. But I just caught it from the discussion. He was encouraging all of us to make sure you just do something. Don't just stay there. Just do something. And this book has been going on. I had it. You know, it's been going to 2 or 3 years. I've been circulating it. I've been using it in my classes. But it wasn't really put together as a book. And then just out of the blues, I didn't solicit for anything. A publisher contacted me and said, would you like to put together a book, which is exactly what I have in mind to do? And I said, well, that maybe. You know, I don't know what it takes to do that. So I put together a prospectus. They wanted a prospectus. I put together prospectus and sent it to them, and they looked at it. They said, wow, we like that. You know, can you give us a proof of concept? You know, we would like to see a chapter or something. I said, sure. So I sent them 1 chapter. They liked it, but it wasn't the way I wanted it at that time. So I started working hard on it in the summer of the year before it was published. So I worked on it, and by the time I got back to them, they looked at it and said, wow, you know how to do all the formatting. Maybe we don't have to do formatting for you. I said, sure, I don't even want you to format for me. I want it the way I have it here. Can I have it that way? They said, yes, if you can do it, we won't touch it. You just give it to us. We'll just send it to your colleagues to look through the material, make sure everything is right, and whatever corrections they have, we'll send it back to you, and you make the correction. I said, that's fantastic, because I'm using some templates and macros that help me to, for example, just change the color at one point, and it changes all through the book. You know, so because I mean. It's a big book. I can't go through page by page. So I have worked myself into some kind of rhythm where I have macros and templates that I could, if I change the look of it on one page, wherever that kind of thing is done in the book, it's automatically adjusted. So it's easy for me to change the format of the book from, okay, this color doesn't really look good, change it to that color, and I just change it in one place, and it reflects all through the book. So that's the way I set it up. So, but it took me a long time to be able to get to that point. But after I've done that, it was pretty easy to put it together, to generate the PDF was just like that. And then when they saw the final product, they just sent it out. And after a while, it came back, and they said, yeah, we can publish it. So then I said, okay, go ahead with it. You know, so that's about this book. Now, I don't know, can I talk about what I have in the future?
Why don't we hold that? Let's go around. Okay. Thanks for Thomas for the initial. Let's go around the questions, comments, and then we can come back to any things that you want to share about future projects. Holger wanted to ask a question initially, and I can.
Yeah. Why
don't you join us around here so we can around the table? There's a place next to Jim.
What I find interesting is these are obviously 3 different types of books / formats of books. but they also have a different history in how
Let's circulate them.
how they started out, gestation. I want to ask Dana on her format that you used as an edited book. I have to be careful that I'm not posing a leading question. So let me see how I put this. Two, I think, really related aspects when you're doing an edited book. If you can speak a little bit to your role as the editor or lead editor, and what that means, how that translates in terms of giving a voice. I think we know what it means if you're a single author of a book. You have a thesis, much like you do a dissertation, you have a thesis that you go by. What does it mean in life, particularly if you have articles where, as you said, you may not be necessarily the expert on? How do you what goes on?
Yeah.
And then secondly, related to that is, how do you, in the process of, you spoke of different versions and having 24 authors, in terms of putting the book together, providing feedback and bouncing back and forth with the authors. You can speak a little bit to that. I hope that was not leading you in any.
Well, I think for me, it started with the concept. So what I was seeing were these kind of trends that were happening in the field of youth work. And I was kind of amassing all of this literature. And there were these 3 different trends that were happening. And I identified people who could speak to each of those, multiple people who could speak. So the way the book is organized, it's organized according to these 3 trends. And then the authors are situated because they speak to one of those trends. So my role as an editor was first inviting authors, right, and figuring out who to bring to the table to kind of tell this one story. And then once I had those initial conversations and people either agreed or didn't agree, the way that I handled it, because I'm not so much a micromanager, is I didn't give too much structure. I said, the vision for the book, right. And then I gave them a deadline to get me something. And then I gave them feedback. And I, said, I kind of think we need a little more detail here, or a little less here. Or maybe you can make this a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. I had a lot of international writers, so sometimes it was, kind of needing to use, American English. So, folks from Australia or Canada, UK. So just some spelling types of things like that. And then at the end, once everything was in, I went through and did one major edit of the book, keeping in mind like having some kind of consistent voice. And then I sent them a final version to say, okay, these are my edits. And they accepted or didn't, however they worked it, we sent it back, and then it went to the main editor. Picking up on Bob's point about how much support you get from the publisher, I agree, there was very little support from the publisher. I did get a copy edit at the very, very end. My experience with that was not good. I had spent endless hours, and the provost knows when the final product is ready to be released, I am a stickler for like every little detail. So I went through with a fine-tooth comb, and the copy editor actually put in errors. And some of them I caught, and some of them I didn't. And so the end result was there were about 5 or 6 errors, some typos, mostly typos or punctuation errors that the copy editor put in that I didn't catch. So it was like, really? I would rather not have a copy editor. I'd rather serve as the copy editor, because I went through so much painstaking detail to make sure it was really, really cleaned up. And I'm sure I missed some stuff, but I think there were more errors after the copy edit. So that was frustrating.
That makes it human book, a book for humans to read.
That's true. That's true.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Martin and then. Remind me your name. Oh.
I'm Rachel Goldman. I'm in the History and Philosophy department.
Great. Thanks, Rachel.
I know, working quite well.
I just want to ask is, Somuno, yes. I want to know, did you have any problem with the length of the book from the publisher? Did you have ever suggested that you reduce it or?
Well,
you know?
yeah, I mean, not really, because they didn't question me that much on I mean, they wanted a frame. Actually, I wrote more than that, and I had to reduce it because I believed it was getting too pricey. You know, it was getting too expensive, and I wrote the book so it could be affordable for my students, and I tried to make them make a deal with me to sell it cheaper for my students.
How much is it?
Well, they agreed initially to sell it, but now it's $140.
That's what I said. That's a cheap
and that's not an unreasonable price for a lab textbook.
There's other prices here. Excuse me, when my Master 7th Avenue appeared in hardcover in 2005, the price was $45. Oh yes, even before that. Originally, I was told that this was going to be, you talk about publishers again, this is going to be a trade book. Okay, and so the price would be $29 or $30. Then it came out as a text, but not, well, I should say text, as a scholarly book at $45. Then the price kept creeping up. Today, if you want to buy the hardbound, it's $70. That may be because they recently came out with the reprint at $23. So it's all marketing here. So there's a differential now between $23 in paper, which they really want to sell, and $70 they feel, well, they got to sell to people who desperately want hardcover, who are in love with hardcover. And that's it. So you see the economics of the situation.
And part of the economics has to do with if your title is a scholarly title, and it is not likely to have too much course adoption, they're looking at the library market. And so for them, what are the libraries willing to pay? And so anything else is a bonus to them.
Okay, Dana, how much is your book? I don't know. I really don't know. I think it was out for 50 something for the soft. The hardcover is ridiculous. It's like $1 something. But I know now they're on Amazon. There's used copies already, so
get more reasonable price.
Yeah, people can get them. You know.
The other thing I wanted to ask you also about editing, because most of the time every book I did the editing myself because they are giving you phone numbers of people to call, they're charging you a lot of money for this. So, yeah. And I see all different kind of things in there. So did you do that or did you did it?
I did everything you see in this book by myself.
Oh, okay. And so you gave what they call the camera ready.
That's correct.
Okay.
I want to say something. I just have a really quick question. Did you
had a quick question first.
Yes, I use later.
I'm sorry. I forgot.
She had a question.
One,
yeah.
then two, and then three.
Yeah.
One thing that is recently coming to attention of publishers is dissertations, and I'm lucky that I'm one of the few recent minted PhDs at the CUNY Grad Center. I submitted my manuscript on the first shot, and it got accepted by a publisher in the humanities. So I'm going through the process right now, and this is very helpful for me. And recently, and because mine is in humanities, I want to have color pictures. And the one thing is that I don't think I'm going to have any pictures because of the copyright issues. And that is something else that they don't teach in graduate school. And the other issue that deals with it is, I always tell other graduate students, never ever send your dissertation out to a publisher. And that's what most graduate students do, so that's a challenge. But this has been very helpful for me.
But you did? Wait.
I revised my dissertation.
Well, you revised
considerably.
But I got totally different advice
and it worked for me.
Wow.
Which is that the advice I was given, maybe it depends on what your dissertation looks
Yeah.
like when you're done, but the advice I was given was to send it out because you were then going to be asked to revise it, and why spend the time revising it first when your readers were going to tell you to revise it again?
That advice may have been good then, but it is no longer good now.
And the other issue is that, is there a better publisher? Is there a ranking of publishing?
Mhm.
And frankly, in my field, it didn't matter because it was just get the book published. And I was lucky that I did. And
Well, you have to, well,
I'm in
there's
the I'm in
Vanity,
history,
yeah,
so.
Vanity Press and
Heather, you wanted to?
I actually.
Okay.
I did want to say something
Linda
else.
Nelson.
I mean, I'm so moved by this story that you told about that. You're encouraging Dana to do that, and just to say how important imagining yourself doing it is, and to have someone or a community encouraging you and pushing you on. It really gave me the chills to hear that, because for me, it was when my advisor was one, I had 3 of them, they all gave me different things for the dissertation, and one of the 3, she kept saying, for your book, you wanted to rethink this for your book. And I was like, I had never thought of you're a graduate, it didn't occur to me. And by her saying that over and over and over again, I imagined it as a book. So I just think it's so important, the role of the imagination. I just wanted to say. That's good. That's it.
That reminded me, I had a question about choosing publishers to work with. I mean, yours came to you, but what kind of criteria did those who looked for a publisher look at? Did you look at the list they
was at
had?
conferences. Actually, I met with them and I told them what my topic, which was color in the ancient world, and they were interested and they gave me their card. So. And I'm glad I didn't send it out to multiple presses.
What was your process of selection?
Okay, well, actually it varied. My first 2 books, they were included in series. One edited by somebody from City College, another that I got into because somebody from St. John's University was aware of my work, and so he somehow, I'm not sure he contacted me directly or he contacted the series editor, and so I got it that way. So the important thing here, the key word is contact here. It's know people, and that's why you're talking about going to conventions, meeting people, letting people know you, let them know your work. Extremely important. But there's another thing too, and I hate to say this, and I've seen it with works that some of my colleagues have published, and that is academic affiliation. In more than one instance, I've seen people drop York from the affiliation. They simply identify with City University of New York, as though York were some kind of leper. And I'm uncomfortable with that.
So am I?
Yeah.
It comes up all the time at the Department of P&D. Our colleague Larry Johnson says it all the time. Where is your college?
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, it's like applying for a job. It's the same kind of thing. We are judged by our affiliation. And I remember I have friends who's a physician talking about another physician and say, well, he went to this medical school. He was a resident only here or there. It's a pecking order, and we have to fight this kind of thing. It's terrible, and really, a show-off flag.
I wanna do 2 things. I wanna come back.
Marcy.
I'm sorry, Marcy.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Professor Parmet just said about people denying their York affiliation. I see it with alums as well, who they graduate, they're doing well, and all of a sudden, they are graduates of the City University of New York, not York College / CUNY. They completely eliminate that part of their experience.
And for me, that is disappointing, but it's a reality we've got to contend with. And the very project of enhancing our reputation by what we produce in books and articles, and be unashamed to tell the world that we have these things, that will make a difference in having people have a sense of pride in the fact that not only is there quality teaching done, there is quality research and there is quality publication. Very important. I want to come back to a question. I'd like to have Femi, Dana, and Bob in particular, and other colleagues, respond to a question that Jin raised when she did her introduction. And the question had to do with, as a young colleague, should I be working on articles, or should I also want to work on a book? We'll start with Femi.
I think you should work on both, because they don't serve the same purpose. One serves to, from my point of view, okay, one serves to show your status among your peers, which is the article for the most part. I can't give my articles to any of my students to read. They wouldn't understand anything I'm saying. So, but I have to publish among them because I want to be recognized as one of those that belong to them. The other one serves to, for me, the purpose of writing a book is to help my students, period. I don't have any other goal. I'm not hunting for money, although if it comes, I'll take it. You know, I should. I mean, because I work for it. But the point is, I'm always looking at my students and looking for how can we better, especially some of these things we're hearing. You know, York was going down. As far as math was concerned, we have to do something to turn it back up again. And some of these books that we get from outside, they don't have our best interests at heart. It's not produced for us. So, you know, so as far as math is concerned, I have to think about how can we make our students, how can we bring them from where they are to where we want them to be, so that they can stand up and say, you know, if you're from MIT or anywhere and you talk about differential equation, I know what you're talking about because I understand this. But to get them to that point, we have to do some things differently. Right. You know, we can't use the same books that I used when I was there because they don't just get it that way. So that's my own motivation for writing books. So it may not cut across everybody, but that's my own motivation for writing this kind of book. And you know, like the one I'm thinking of working on now, although I have to produce.
Let's hold that for a few minutes. Let's hold the future for a few minutes.
Okay.
But I want to transition to Dana, but before we transition, I want to say here what I've said at the Department of Math and Computer Science, and I've said elsewhere, and Linda may have heard me say it, Eddie Martin. Textbooks are also valued by the provost. It's a different kind of work, but all of us study with textbooks in college and in grad school. So I'd like colleagues not to feel that writing a textbook is in some way not valued. It is in some way money-making. What's wrong with money-making? That's what part of America is all about. So please don't feel compelled to be restricting yourself. If you want to write a textbook, write a textbook. So that's just my comment. Dana, any thoughts? On the articles book, the Jin question?
Yeah, and I don't know why I think this is true, but I feel like going from an assistant to an associate professor in our field, you need journal articles. I think going from an associate to a full is when you could think about a book. And I don't know what makes me say that. I just feel like part of the tenure and promotion process, writing a book is it's a different kind of peer review. And then there are publishers who actually do peer reviews. Routledge does not. Routledge is a quality press in our field. It's one of the top. So that carries weight, but I still think that going through the peer review process, when you're going from assistant to associate, I think that's the feedback. I think that's the process and the feedback you need, rather than focusing on a book. Unless you get that book right out of grad school. You know, I mean, nobody ever mentioned to me as a grad student, you should think about a book. Never. He was the first one who said, write a book.
So what do you think, Bob?
Okay, my experience back in the early 70s, I may prove instructive here. It was 72. I received a grant to write a biography of a longtime Republican politician, senator from New York, president of the New York Central Railroad, one of the leading orators of the late 19th century, Chauncey Depew, whose name was for years associated with the New York Central Railroad and was advisor to the Vanderbilts around the place. Anyway, and sure enough, there was a collection of Depew papers, manuscripts, at Yale University, at the Rare Book Manuscript Library at Yale, not too far from here, within range. Okay, accessible, 13,000 pieces, as I recall. And nobody had written a biography on him here. I'd say, hey, look, this is a person with a long political career, long business career, exceptionally well known. And I even I still have it, 10 volumes of his speeches, collected speeches, Chauncey Depew, more than a place called Doc Jewell's Auction Barn up in Sharon Springs, New York. Remember that? Okay. Anyway, so I got a grant, I plunged into it, Chauncey Depew, and talking about writing. A funny thing happened on the way to the biography. Yeah, I had material, and some of it was extremely interesting, such as the competition between New York and other cities to host the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893. If you haven't read Devil in the White City, read that fantastic book about that. Anyway, and so I had good material on this because Depew was involved in that battle. But then you realize something and learn things. And you learn things, by the way, from people with whom you work, librarians. Our librarians are very helpful to me in town and county. Again, librarians, manuscript librarians, oh, they are amazing. They're a tremendous asset. Okay, I learned something very simply, that Depew, with a long career in politics, that things were obviously not too nice at times, and so his widow took his papers, threw them on the floor of their house, and went through it and expurgated the whole thing. She did kind of cleansing of materials, and I discovered this just by going through them. They were all too squeaky clean. Something was wrong here. In other words, the biography...
It didn't strike you as a kind of Depew kind of book.
Yeah, exactly. This was not a politician. This is not a businessman, a long-time businessman. Something was wrong here, and of course it stripped the material of interest and the significance, and I finally said, forget it. So what happened here? Okay, never got the biography, but I did get an article out, I think a very nice article, on the World's Columbian Exposition. So what do I say here? Yeah, a funny thing happens on the way to a book. If you're writing, okay, maybe get an article out of it. And you're not off the railroad track, the New York Central Railroad track. That was the whole thing here. So I didn't go out of my way in terms of research, but still at least had something to show for it all. Not the volume, but at least a decent journal article.
Great.
Horace, I have a question for you as somebody who's written 7 books. How do you define success? How do you know when your book is successful? Because it feels like a little bit of a... Yeah, well, that's the thing. You know, for me, I don't know, I always am looking for more social purpose. And so I find it a little bit of a lull now that the book is out. Like, finishing it is just not enough for me. Like, that's not satisfying in a way.
It's time for your next book then.
Yeah.
No, I know, but yeah, I want to know I want to know how do you know what
citing your book, that's really interesting to do. See how your work is being used.
Okay,
Put your name in Google Scholar. See what comes up.
Or to come back to Bob's point, the librarians can tell you of adoption, and they can tell you of citation, and they can tell you of relevance. I would say, Dana, for me, there would be 3 markers of success. And this is beyond getting the book out. And some of it would be related to the kind of subject you're writing. One marker of success is your book adopted for courses? Even if it's not a textbook, where is your book being adopted for courses, and by whom? One of the things I learned when I was coming up a full professor by the institution I was at, Research University up there, one of the requirements for moving from associate to full was to show the significance of your work. where is it cited, but for the books, where your books were being used. And so our librarians and the publisher, the Penn State Press, was the one that I was using as the Penn State Press sent me a list of the places that had bought the book for course use. So who is using your book, where it's being adopted is one important marker. Also for me is what new research has come out of your book by other people saying, validating or questioning what you do and coming up with your own work. And I remember I had a PhD student from Colombia, Luis Orjuela, who rushed into my office one day so excited. He's using your theory. I said, Luis, tell me, calm down, what is it? He was working on another book, aspect of a book I was working on, and he discovered there was a PhD student in Switzerland who was using the concept I created of geonarcotics as a point of departure for his own study. And I think if your work leads to other people embracing your concepts, embracing your theory, or saying, this guy is wrong for these reasons, countervailing you, that for me is an important success. I remember once I got an email from the University of Uppsala in Sweden. There was a group called the Silk Road Study. They were studying narcotics trafficking in Asia, Silk Roads. They wanted to adopt the framework I had originated for their work. And so they were telling me they had read the original, they had not read the original article, they had read the book that I had written, but they wanted to go back to the article. So their library in Sweden didn't have the journal, so they wanted me to send them a copy of the journal article. So I think if people are using your work, endorsing it, or saying for whatever reason this work has shortcomings, that for me is an important margin of success. But I think the third would be to what extent you are able to build on other works from your previous work. You may have done a book on youth work, but you wouldn't cover everything that is maybe deserving of covering. Is there other prospect for other works building on this? That would be, for me, a valuable way of determining your success.
How about number of books sold?
That too, yeah. I mean, I
What's
still
a good
get,
number?
Depends on the price.
That,
I'm curious.
that depends on the price.
Depends on the price. At 140,
That depends
20 of these are a good thing.
Now when students have to buy it.
Right, it depends on the fee, it depends on the
you're saying for
price,
him, not
it
the
depends on Holger has a number of books as well, and his field, my field, I'm sure you have for your books world rights. So when I get the royalty statement, I look to see where is the book sold. Is it sold in the United States? Is it being sold in Europe? Is it being sold in Latin America? And so it's not just a number of sales, and I still get royalties in a Penn State book. It's not $2,000, $3,000, but $700 every year or so. It's good.
Yeah, along these lines, what you can do is, one, look into footnotes and endnotes of books in related fields. All right, and bibliography too, see if you're cited.
Right.
Okay, that's always nice. And another thing too is just go to your computer and Google in the title of your dissertation, okay? And you will find that X number of university libraries have copies of that dissertation.
Right.
That'll make you feel good. Okay.
Alternatively, you can check WorldCat, and that will list
Tell
the
you.
libraries very quickly. And if they don't have your book, then maybe
That's
they
not
should
good.
get it.
Yep.
You haven't mentioned reviews in this conversation. I'm curious about that.
Well, reviews are important too. Reviews are critical. And
I
you're
know
going to
I've been
find.
invited to do a lot of book talks.
That's good.
Yeah, that's been an indicator for me is, you know, I'm just every couple of months I get a call to come and talk about the book.
But the reviews, see, that's again with the publisher, you know, how much are they sending the book out and where are they sending it out to, so.
But here again, that connects, that point, which is important, connects to something that Dana said. There is a tendency among us academics to be self-effacing. You've got to be less self-effacing. you've got to do some of the marketing. You have got to say to your publisher, or say to journals, I'd like to have my book sent to you for review. There's nothing wrong with your saying to the publisher, send it to these people. Actually, the publisher should ask you. The publisher doesn't ask you, something is wrong. But not only listen to what the publisher asks, if you have a couple of journals that you think you would love to have, or newspapers, be sure that you network to ensure that at least a submission of it is happening.
It costs them so little to produce these books. They are publishing thousands of books. I mean, you look at Rutledge, and they have so many divisions that they give very little support in terms of this type of thing, you know, reviews and things.
But see, again, that's connections and, you know,
Networking.
Nurturing it, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to take Bob, and then I want to move to the three presenters to tell us what's in your futures. What one or two things you've got in mind, and is there a way for us to help you with comments and feedback on what you've got? Bob?
In researching my Master's 7th Avenue, I met somebody named Barry Ewen, E-W-E-N, who is an editor and reviewer for the New York Times Book Review. And so I thought, quite naively, that New York Times would review my book. Of course, it did not. And then I, of course, discovered some other things about the New York Times Book Review. And if you look, I think they review 400 books a year, something like that. You realize with the number that's published, you're really lucky to get into that 400. Okay, so what's going on here? For one thing, they normally don't review university press books. And it's a matter of economics, too. It's, one thing is interest. Okay, they're too narrow, they're too scholarly. People are offended by footnotes and endnotes, all of that. Okay, we understand that. All right. But the other thing, too, is that the university publishers don't advertise in the New York Times Book Review. It's too expensive. So nobody's scratching the New York Times back, and they're not scratching the university publishers back. And so it goes that way here. So they ignore, almost always, the university press publications. Can't win with them. And so don't be disheartened when they don't take your book.
Mm-hmm. Good. Let's start with Femi and take 2 minutes, talk about your future projects, or one of your future projects.
Okay. Well, I use a number of new computer programming. It's not, we call them computer algebra systems in math that help to do some work in math. I use 3 different kinds in this book. So the sister, the one I call the sister to this book, is just going to concentrate on one of those programming computer algebra systems. That will be the sister of this one. But I was just approached, like I said, by another publisher. That, you know, why don't I think about writing a book on one of the gateway courses we have here in New York. So what I would love to do with that will be, I don't want to do that just by myself. I like collaboration. I like collaboration. I like to probably collaborate across CUNY, if it were possible, you know, so that I would know what they're looking for in their institution and what we are doing here, so we can actually work together to justify me putting my effort behind that. So that's what's next for me in terms of books. But I love the idea of writing book, even though it's very, very time consuming. But I love it.
Good. Dana?
Well, I actually have 3 book projects happening. They're all kind of in the idea phase. One is one that I'm looking at writing on my own, and I have to produce a chapter for someone else who's writing a book, and I'm going to start with that and then hopefully, you know, embellish that into a fuller book. And the other 2 are also edited. One is co-editing with someone else who's at another university. The other one, which I'm probably most excited about, is co-editing with one of the youth work practitioners who's a master practitioner. She's been in the field for 30 years. And it's going to be more of a practice book, something that could be used for professional development of youth workers.
Great. Well,
right now I'm considering basically 2 possibilities. I've been fishing around. One would be a spin-off of a talk I gave at the college last year at a symposium hosted by the social work people, and it was titled "The Empire Strikes Back," about the assault on organized labor in this country. And so I'm thinking of doing something along those lines, and the conflict between big business and big labor. That's one thing, since the New Deal. That's one other possibility. And the other possibility is to just keep me in the immigration area, because I've worked in ethnic history for so many years, would be something on what's called the new nativism, the attack on immigrants today. But again, the problem here is that it may be more sociological than historical. I'm going to go back, and an awful lot has been written, and I don't want, see, this is the thing, I really don't want to rehash what other people said. I want to do something original, creative, and feel good about it. Yeah. And so, and that applies really to the labor topic as well. It's difficult really to try to find one's own niche that is original, and in which one can take pride, say, and claim ownership. This is mine. This is really my contribution. So essentially, that's where I am right now.
Great. Good. Let me recommend that we use the next 10 minutes in the following way. I want to pick up on one point from each of the speakers as a comment, as well as a point from what was just said about the futures. And then, if we have time, we can open for a few minutes. And then I want to tell you what the next steps are intended to be. Bob said something that I want to revisit, and that is the business of negotiating, if you've got negotiating room. And no one writing a book now should neglect the possibility of negotiating for an e-book. If you're writing a book now, part of that negotiation package is, can I get an e-book simultaneous with, or can I get an e-book a year or two afterwards? I said, but keep in the negotiation package the e-book, because that's a different kind of market, a different kind of audience. Many universities are now having as many hard books as e-books, and so the reach is a different kind of reach on that. Of course, you want to negotiate. Is there software that go with it? Are there ancillaries that you may want to go with it? Is there a CD that goes with it, depending upon the field you're working in? But at the minimum, I would say part of that negotiation package, if you've got the scope for negotiation, is to talk about an e-book. Now, sometimes it is possible to negotiate a book you already produced, the e-book. I did a book, an edited book a few years ago with Macmillan, and they said to me, I didn't have to negotiate. Yours was selected as one of the new e-books in this area. So e-books, keep e-books in mind, Jen, as you do your book. Dana said something which I want us not to underestimate, and that is getting a contract. Getting a contract is sometimes difficult, but it is valuable in at least two respects. It gives you the psychological comfort that you don't have to worry to scramble to find someone to produce this book. You have publisher. At the end of the day, all the years and all the sweat, and there is somebody here, unless you really mess up, or they fold, your book is going to see the light of day. But getting the contract in advance can also help you to deal with some of those important logistics which they're not necessarily paying for anymore. Knowing what style the publisher wants makes a difference. You can spend a lot of time having to redo stuff because they're doing Chicago style, and you started an MLA, or they're doing APA, and you're doing. So it helps you on style. It helps you on what the page limitations. You don't write a book 400 pages and then no publisher wants it. If you have those practical parameters established from the beginning, it helps to make the sanity and the timetable work a little better. And I want to come to something that Femi said insofar as motivating the motivation he had writing a book for his students. I would say not only is it a practical nexus between the teaching and the research, but also keep in mind, Jane, and keep in mind our colleagues, Cindy, sometimes you can get questions from your students that serve as a basis for inquiry of your own. So it's something your students say or question you about, say, geez, I don't know the answer to that. I'll research it. Maybe start with an article, then get a book. So don't underestimate the value of your students in creating space for you to go there on the research front. And in talking about the new projects, Femi talked about collaborating. Collaboration has its own rewards and pitfalls. And I would say if you're going to collaborate, especially if it's a colleague who is a friend, define the terms of engagement early and in writing. Who is doing what, and who is doing it by when, and who is doing it how. Especially if you got a contract that says you have X amount of space, you have a certain deadline, your colleagues have stuff to do, you've got stuff to do. If you don't clarify who is doing what, how, and when, you may find yourselves in fractured friendships and delayed projects. The spin-offs that Bob talked about. I'm writing a book right now that's a spin-off. I delivered a lecture 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Got such great response. And I myself, this is Eric Williams' lecture. Once it went out on the internet, there was a lot of good conversation and good feedback. So I've got to approach a publisher. Actually, the publisher that gave me the contract was not my first choice. The first choice I had, I was almost ready to sign, and then a friend said, why don't you try my publisher? So I decided to put this one on hold. This other publisher was, in the world of publishers, more reputable. They're both university presses, but one is more reputable than the other. So I've signed a contract with University of Illinois Press to do this book. It makes a difference if you've got the contract, but you can also do the spin-off. You start one lecture, you start a small article, and you say, geez, let me just put a couple of chapters and get it.
Provost, quick question. So you said you almost signed with the first publisher. So how do you then go back? What did you do? Go back and say, sorry, I changed my mind?
Yes.
Okay.
Since you didn't sign, there's no obligation. You're going to the point and say, well, I'm going a different direction. That's all I said. I'm going in a different direction. I didn't tell them who I've signed with, but it is just my call was I have a better deal with a more reputable press who has a greater, come back to some of the points Bob makes, a greater marketing and other network. Bob?
First, I'd like to underscore the point you made about co-authorship. Once upon a time, I was going to write a history of American education. Okay, along with somebody from the college, a colleague. And I discovered that this person really wasn't doing anything. And so I terminated that relationship, that partnership. But did it early enough to maintain a decent relationship. Okay, that's important too.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so when you realize that you have a problem, get out of it early. Get out of it. Okay, the other thing too, I'll pass on some advice that I got from my brother, who's the author of 11 books. And that's this. If you suspect that you're having a problem finding a publisher, all right, size up your situation. Liken yourself to the person who's in the middle of a desert looking for a ride. You take the first camel that comes along, all right? So you get the publisher. And it may not be the most prestigious or the best publisher, whatever it is, but you have a publisher. And you're not wandering the desert for another year or two. So that's 2 cents worth of advice.
Great, good advice. Let's conclude on the following note. Other than Dana, Femi, and Bob, I would welcome having the price of lunch be the following. Send a maximum of 2-page reflection. Is there anything you found valuable in the conversation today? Is there anything that you might lead you to want to write or edit a book? And how might colleagues here help? How might the college help? Not long. Up maximum of 2 pages. Send it to Dawn by 2 weeks, and then we'll see how we can facilitate moving forward. Finally, our next conversation will be about grant writing. We haven't set a date as yet, but we're going to make it in early May. Beth Rosenthal, Ruel De Samero, and Lydia Gonzalez We're going to talk about their experiences in writing grants, what worked, what didn't work. And so that will be the final conversation today. I want to thank our colleagues for sharing their wisdom and expertise, and keeping on with their good work.